Hello, I'm Carmen Falcon, an AARP New Jersey volunteer, and I want to welcome you to another AARP New Jersey Fraud Facebook Live. Today we are joined by Maggie Zimmerman, who is a CPA and the Assistant Director of the Office of Clearance and Settlement within the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's new SEC's Division of Exams. Prior to joining the Securities and Exchange Commission, Maggie worked in private industry for 9 years in derivatives, accounting, forensic accounting, investigations, and tax. She holds two master's degrees, one in accounting and one in taxation, and an undergraduate degree in Asian studies, and she speaks Mandarin Chinese. Maggie, we're thrilled that you can join us today. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. Before I answer any questions, I have to give my standard disclaimer. So any remarks that I provide today are in my official capacity as the Assistant Director of the Office of Clearance and Settlement in the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, but do not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission, the commissioners, or other members of the staff.
Wonderful.
So I think today we were going to talk about scams focused on elder investors, right?
Correct. So let me just speak to our viewers so they can understand how to interact with us, and then we will begin. Okay. For our viewers, we want this to be an interactive discussion. So if you have a question on fraud and scams, please type it in the comments section, and we'll do our best to get to it live. So Maggie, let's begin. There are more than 1 million people in New Jersey who care for an older loved one. And this includes taking care of their loved one's financial well-being and investments. If you're caring for an older loved one, you should know that scams aimed at older investors are on the rise. So Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about why fraudsters are aiming at older adults?
I think social isolation has always been a factor in targeting older adults. It makes more seniors vulnerable to exploitation because seniors, in many cases, live alone. And, as their friends pass on, and maybe it's more difficult to get to church or wherever it was that they socialize, they become increasingly isolated. So the perpetrators of these kind of frauds take advantage of this sort of isolation, and they often strike when seniors are at their most vulnerable moments. Like, for example, after a close family member or a spouse has passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes scammers will take advantage of information that's on social media, like obituaries and comments. And then they will use that to actually target people deliberately. And so they will also try to exploit trust in whatever seniors' social networks are that they have. Again, I mentioned like church as an example. One thing that we see at the SEC a lot is something called affinity fraud, especially in the New York area where we have large immigrant communities.
Okay.
So what affinity fraud is when a member of the particular cultural group that the person comes from kind of takes advantage of that trust of being like the same member of that group. Like, let's say, they're all Chinese immigrants, just for example. And so they may take advantage of somebody, based on that connection. The other thing that is important to remember is that fraudsters often take advantage of fear that seniors may have of running out of money in retirement, or of missing an investment opportunity, or just feeling kind of like left behind, out of the loop, like they're not, up to date on the latest investments. And so fraudsters can kind of make them feel less than, and then take advantage of them in that way.
Wow, that's quite sad, right? There is one lady that I see in my town, and I see her every year walking, and she's always walking. She's by herself. So one time I actually decided to speak with her because I was just curious, because I was always seeing her by herself. And she did tell me that she does live alone. Her husband died many years ago, but she does have a daughter that looks out for her. So if family members are around, to be watching out for them, but also, I would think my town, because it's small, the police officers know her, and
That's
probably
good.
they're looking out for her as well. Yeah, when you get old, it's kind of sad that someone will take advantage of your situation.
Hmm.
So this is something that people have to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to remind our viewers that if you have any questions about investment fraud, please type it in the chat and we'll do our best to get to it live. So Maggie, so what are some of the red flags that caregivers should look out for?
Well, I think the first thing is a little bit touchy-feely in that if you have a bad gut feeling about something, you shouldn't be afraid to ask about it, and contact someone you trust, a friend or other organizations. You know, I'll always shill for CPAs, right? You can always ask like a trusted investment professional. You can use information on our website to verify things about a person or an investment if you're feeling in any way suspicious. There are some more kind of more discreet warning signs though that I've have here written so that I don't forget all of them. But the first one would be on the lookout for people who suddenly kind of insert themselves into the life of the person that you're caring for.
Right.
People who all of a sudden are so concerned about this person, and those people could actually be family members. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And those people tend to be kind of overly protective all of a sudden. So if that kind of raises your suspicions, that's totally valid. Also, if the person that you're caring for is providing their passwords or other kinds of account information to someone where it's just totally inappropriate. I mean, obviously they may provide that information to their tax preparer or something like that, but to just some other person, that is another red flag. Also, if the person that you're caring for all of a sudden is afraid of someone or their feelings toward them change, there might be something, going on, like, where money has been exchanged. Also, other red flags would be if the person that you care for doesn't really have much knowledge of what their actual financial status is. Like they don't know how much they have in the bank or where their investments are, or all of a sudden they're reluctant to talk about financial things. Something may have happened and they may be embarrassed, right? Also, sudden changes in spending habits are something to look out for, as well as sudden changes to wills and trusts, any kind of like estate planning. If it's all of a sudden they're changing it, you might want to ask questions about that. And then finally, if you do have access to the person's financial records, if there's strange checks made out to cash, loans to people that seem strange, or just altogether disappearance of valuables, accounts are drained, jewelry's gone, what have you. And two, strange signatures on the backs of checks, if you're able to get the clear checks from the bank. I think all of those things would be indicators that something is afoot.
Wow, that is a comprehensive list, and I'm sure there's more, but it's quite something that you have to be aware of. And,
well, I will say this, and again, this is kind of a topic that is still being fleshed out. It's kind of controversial, but I always want to mention it because every time I do some sort of community talk, I always get questions about it. And I would say, be on the lookout for a sudden interest in electronic currencies, cryptocurrency, those kind of things, because those are very complex, and you really have to understand the risks involved in those kind of instruments. So I would say, if you're maybe tech averse senior citizen that you care for suddenly has an investment in cryptocurrency, that might be another thing to watch out for, because I know that's kind of the hot topic at the moment.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, do senior centers get access to information? Maybe we could talk about it later when we talk about resources, but
yeah, well, let's talk about it in the resources section. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right. In 2022 alone, there were 104,000 reports to the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, on investment fraud. Can you explain what tools fraudsters are using and how we can protect ourselves from this rising criminal act?
Well, as I alluded to in my last response, fraudsters use technology, right? Just like we all do, but they use it for nefarious purposes. So fraudsters tend to use the internet to commit fraud. And they know that, all of us, not just seniors, but all of us increasingly rely on the internet for electronic payments, for shopping, and also as a social outlet, a social network, right? So they utilize it to contact their victims. And research has shown that people who are contacted by scammers through social media or pop-ups on websites are more likely to engage with scammers and lose money than people who are contacted by phone or contacted by email. And then the other thing that I want to talk about a little bit, because I have a personal anecdote about it, is romance scams. So again, we talked about loneliness and social isolation. So, especially like widows and widowers, right? Maybe they want to find some kind of companion. Will go on, online dating sites, and there are a lot of scammers on there that will deliberately target seniors. This kind of thing happened to my friend's mother. She was targeted by a man who claimed to be a U.S. serviceman living abroad. Now, she is a Chinese immigrant. And so I think had she maybe been born and raised here, she would have been a little bit more kind of clued into like English language media about where the U.S. had troops and didn't have troops. Okay. Because this guy claimed to be stationed in a place that we didn't have troops. So that would have been the first red flag, right? But he told her he loved her. Eventually, he asked her for money. She willingly wired it to him. And then when she finally, said, I'm not going to send you any more money, he started to threaten her. And again, preying on the fears. Even though she had her U.S. citizenship, she still felt intimidated by this. He threatened to send ICE or whoever, the immigration authorities these days, that she was going to get deported. Just all this terrifying stuff happened. And she wasn't able to get her money back because this person wired it offshore. And when that happens, and it often does because it's so easy to move money to other countries these days, it's very, very difficult to get it back, even for the United States government. So those kind of scams, unfortunately, are increasingly common. So I think that some of the best ways, though, to protect the person that you care for, again, is to, keep in contact, know what they're doing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And, if there's any kind of investment that someone is asking you to make, you need to try to do research into it. So yes, you can see if that person who is promoting the investment maybe has been identified by other consumer agencies or members of the public. That is one place where we can use technology to our advantage, right? Is that people will post online if somebody has ripped them off. And you can oftentimes find those kind of posts online if you look for them.
Well, it's very sad. It's very sad news. It happens often. That's what you hear.
Yes, it does. And so the other thing too, as a caregiver, is that you can just maintain an awareness of what kind of scams are out there that may target, seniors in particular. And also to, just focus on having some kind of financial literacy and health for both you and, the person that you're caring for. There is information out there that, isn't biased, is more educational in nature, rather than trying to sell you something about how to manage your personal finances. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that if something does happen, never be afraid to speak up and complain about it. Like my friend's mother was so embarrassed. She didn't come to her daughter and tell her until she had spent $90,000 on this man. And I think her total retirement savings were only something less than 200K. So, like half of her money was gone. And she just felt so ashamed that she had been fooled. but you
Mhm.
can't wait that long. If something happens, you want to try to act quickly and report it to the relevant authorities. And so there's us, there's state securities regulators, and you can also report it to an organization called FINRA, which is kind of Wall Street's like self-regulatory body.
Wow. Maggie, a lot going on, a lot going on. So now you kind of gave us some information, but if something does happen to someone, where can they actually go for either more information or to report this type of scam?
So in addition to whatever are the pertinent authorities in your individual state, so what you can do is Google, whatever state you live in, securities regulator, something like that. The SEC has a website called investor.gov, Gov. And so you can use that website to check the background of anyone who is selling an investment. And you can also read different alerts and bulletins about investing. So we put out, like in the exams program, we always have like a risk alert that we put out when new products come out that may be targeted toward investors in an inappropriate way or high risk. And you can read those to kind of understand what's out there. There's also different kind of tools and calculators that you can use on our site. So for example, if you're buying a bond and you want to know, what are the monthly payments going to be for the life of the bond? You can make those kind of calculations with different tools. There's also free tools on, I think, a website called bankrate.com and also on Morningstar, but that is a paid subscription. Morningstar is, but that has a lot of information on different equities as well. And if something does happen, like I mentioned before, you can definitely report it to the Securities and Exchange Commission. We have a tips, complaints, and referral system, TCR is what we call it. And so the address for that is www.sec.gov/TCR. And finally, if you don't want to do that, we have an 800 number, 1-800-732-0330, and an email, which is, I think, the easiest to remember out of all of those, help@sec.gov.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And again, kind of referencing the question I asked earlier, this information is something that the senior centers can actually access as well, right?
Yeah, as long as you have an internet connection, you can get on our website and all that information is available online. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. This is wonderful information that you're sharing. As we're wrapping up our conversation, Maggie, now, do you have any closing thoughts for our caregivers with warning signs for investment fraud or anything else that we may have missed?
Well, I would say more so about than warning signs is more just about keeping in contact. I think is the most important thing, especially, as we're coming out of the pandemic where people, didn't have good face-to-face contact for a long time. I think maintaining that is the most important thing to understanding what the person that you care for is feeling, if they're feeling fearful, and how they might be susceptible to these kind of people. What are their online activities? Are they lonely? How are they getting, social interaction? Who are they interacting with? I think if you understand all of those things pretty well, you hopefully would be able to spot something that's amiss. And two, you can have an honest conversation with them about, these scams that are out there, not to make them, more fearful than they might already be, but just to let them know that these kind of people exist and, to just be vigilant. And I mentioned before, if something happens, don't be afraid, don't be embarrassed, most importantly, to speak up, let people know that it happened, and contact the relevant regulatory agencies as soon as possible, because the sooner that you put that contact through, the sooner they can actually act on it, on the information. And then finally, it's just about education too. You really need to understand how an investment works that you're being pitched. And I would say read the fine print always. every investment should have some kind of document that outlines the terms of it, like a prospectus, or in the case of like certain variable annuity contracts, it'll have a very long contract document. You need to read those to really understand what are all the stipulations, what fees am I paying, what do I get paid, right, as an investor? How do I get paid? How often? Is it guaranteed in any way, right? You need to know all of those things. And if you don't understand, keep asking questions. And most importantly, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? Yeah. So that's what I would say. And then too, I would just give a particular warning for some of the electronic currency type investments that are the hot thing these days, just to be fully aware of how they work, because they're very complex. I think a lot of, professionals in the industry who have decades and decades of experience don't even necessarily understand how all of these things work.
Yep, it's quite scary.
So for the average person, really, really do your homework about all of those things.
Maggie, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful information you shared with us today. So thank you so much for joining us today. Now, for our viewers, if you are concerned that you have been scammed, you can reach a trained volunteer at the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline at 877-908-3360. Again, that's 877-908-3360. If you like more information and resources on fraud and scams from AARP New Jersey, please visit aarp.org/njfightsfraud. Again, that's aarp.org/njfightsfraud. If you're interested in learning more about free fun events, special offers, and the latest news from AARP, text the word YES to email to 50757. Again, that's the word YES, the number 2, email to 50757 to receive a one-time text message from AARP with a link to sign up for emails and learn about what AARP has to offer. Message and data rates may apply. We hope you've learned something new today about how you can stay safe from fraud and scams, and hope you tune in to our next Facebook Live. Thank you and have a great day.